moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I'm commenting on a kind of a thread that's been going back and forth. There's a little bit of an argument that's hit on Twitter, and so this guy who just opened up a comic shop, just recently opened up a comic shop in, and I think in Oregon, but not Portland, Oregon. By the way, just as an aside, people have to realize that there's a vast amount of terrain in the United States. So when you say something like, "Hey, somebody opened up a comic store in Washington," you don't automatically assume it's a comic store because it's you've heard about Seattle in the news, and that's your impression of the entire state. Things don't work that way. Same thing with Portland. Portland, obviously, people have been seeing this stuff on TV about that city, but Oregon, as it turns out, is a big state, and you can have comic shops in other places. It just, I always have to laugh because there's this knee-jerk reaction to boil everything down to one location. It's like, hey, you know what Texas is? Texas is Dallas. That's it. There really are no other places in Texas, just Dallas. That's all. Anyway, it doesn't work that way. But anyway, there's this thread going on. The guy just opened up a comic shop, and I've been talking to him back and forth, and he's having a good time. And it's always cool to see somebody opening up their first comic shop. It's just kind of that happy exploration of the business, figuring out what to do, the hijinks, the oh my god, I didn't realize it was really this bad with ordering comics. It's fun. It's fun to see. But the comment that the person made was, I'm basically on Twitter goes, I'm starting to realize that what is talked about online and on YouTube is not what's talked about in the shop. The conversations that happen with customers in the local comic shop, in the store, what people are asking for, what they're looking for, what irritates them, what doesn't irritate them, bear little to no resemblance to what a lot of YouTube channels talk about and what you see on Twitter. If you looked on Twitter, you'd have the impression that the two kind of dominating arguments are how a lot of comic fans are Nazis and the fact that there's too much woke comics. But the crazy part is, I talk to retailers I know, I visit, I think about my own experience in a shop. And I can't, there's this comic is too woke does not come up. Neither does, the people who are, reading comics from the 80s are Nazi. That's never been said. It's never actually come out in the shop. And I mentioned this before, and people have come back with well, that's because you're in commie town of Seattle, and, they don't say things like that there. Well, again, if you leave Seattle and you go not even 10 miles east to Bellevue or Redmond, things start to change politically pretty damn quick. You go 10 miles past that, you start to get out to like Monroe, you'll have people driving around. I was out in Monroe a week and a half ago, if you're familiar with that part of Washington, and this is Monroe to Seattle is less than 30 miles. And there are guys driving around in a, FU Biden truck, like a truck with a giant flag that says "F you Biden," driving up and down Main Street, shouting out of his windows. This is. I'm just saying. No, the fact that this doesn't come up in the shop is not because you live in commie Seattle or you live in Oregon. It's just the conversations that happen in the comic shop are fundamentally different than what you see online. By the way, when I say that, it seems to trigger people. They get really irritated about it, and they come up with bizarre excuses like, well, they're thinking it. They just don't want to say it in real life because I never would say something like that in real life. It's just very bizarre, kind of the mental gymnastics people go through, which cuts both ways, by the way. If you're finding yourself getting really steamed angry right now because you don't like what's being said, remember, this cuts the other direction too. The amount of conversations that you've had in a comic store that I've ever heard about, say, Warren Ellis shouldn't be allowed to make comics because people don't, that's not how it goes. If Warren Ellis comes up in a comic shop these days, it's usually around the, hey, why isn't Warren Ellis making comics? Oh, yeah, he got into some trouble. Oh, that's too bad. I wish there were some Warren Ellis comics I could buy. I guess I'll buy some back issues of Warren Ellis. That's how the conversations go. Honestly, people do not go into law like, well, it seems, here's the exact problem. Oh, it's good that he's having to apologize to people. Nobody is saying that. Nobody is saying, hey, that Kenneth Rockerford guy, did you know he was on a live stream with somebody that we don't like, and therefore I hope he doesn't have comics anymore. No, nobody says any of that. If Dale Keown comes up in a comic shop, in a real life comic shop, what comes up is like, hey, what's Dale Keown doing lately? I don't know. I miss him on Pit. What happened to Pit? Oh, they should make more Pit. That's the conversation. That's how it goes. The world of in the shop versus online is very, very different. Now, again, that doesn't mean the conversation online is not important. It is important. It's just important in a very different way. The people who are in the shop are what you would call, from a business perspective, captured customers. They're people who are already intending to, or are, spend money with you. That's a very important group. Don't piss those people off. You definitely irritate and isolate those people based on things you've heard on my channel before, like confusing them with the comics that are coming out, putting out 3 Robin comics in the same week for no apparent reason. It's stuff like that that irritates them. Rebooting your comic. All those sales analysis videos, that I've done, the ones that show the curves and everything else, that tells you what's going on in the shop. Things like reboots, relaunches, variant schemes, all that kind of stuff tends to chase customers away. Or put a better way, Joe put it a very good way. It gives people a reason not to buy. What you want to do with that captured customer audience is give them a reason to buy. You listen to their concerns in the comic shop. Those concerns are almost always, hey, these comics are getting too expensive. Hey, why are they putting out so many of the same comic all at once for some reason? Hey, why, how does this comic fit into this other comic? Hey, if I'm reading Trial of Magneto and it's happening at the same time as Inferno, which one comes first and is basically, Inferno spoiling Trial of Magneto? I had this conversation with a retailer in Factoria. Again, another Washington place. Factoria Mall has a little comic shop inside of it. Really wonderful proprietor in there. Definitely a nice shop. He'll hook you up. But he was saying that he lost a bunch of sales on Trial of Magneto. Why? Because people wanted to read Inferno. That was the final Hickman product, and that was the one that at least Marvel was hyping up as the important one. So he said, when people found out that these 2 series, the Trial of Magneto and Inferno, were going to run at the same time, a lot of people just stopped buying Trial of Magneto because they felt the story wasn't important. Because they had Inferno there, and Inferno shows that Magneto is still sitting on the council hanging out. He didn't go into the pit with Sabretooth. So therefore, who cares? Why do we need to pay attention to this thing? And he's like, that by running them at the exact same time like that, it killed sales. Okay. He's giving you, what's funny is a day later, I'm talking about that with a guy in David Gabriel's office, and they're like, well, that's not true. I'm like, well, what do you mean that's not true? He's like, it's not true. Customers aren't doing that. I'm like, no, you're not listening. This is what a retailer is telling you. The retailer is telling you that people cut their orders. Are you saying that retailer lied and people didn't actually cut their orders? Are you saying that retailer is a lunatic? That, it's like, no, I don't believe it. Like, but the sales numbers for Trial of Magneto are soft for being a big event. Why is that? Well, because COVID. What are we even talking about right now? This is why I hate a lot of these arguments that come up, because they wander into disingenuous insanity territory very, very quickly, where there is an obvious answer there, one that we can all see, but for whatever reason, we're ignoring it. Online, a lot of these arguments of, social politics in comics, creator behavior on social media, all that kind of stuff, it matters, but that is less likely to hit your captured customer audience. It's hitting a group that is arguably not buying your comic right now anyway. You're actually hitting your potential customer audience, which is also important, but it is a different group, and it's important to recognize that. It is a little bit weird to me that a lot of the people online believe that what they're yelling about on YouTube, what they're angry about, what they're outraged about, is the story of what's going on in the comic shop. But if you actually visit a comic shop and you hang out there, it's really, really easy. Very quickly, you realize it's not the case. It's a different world. It's a very different story going on there. And if you want to be successful in comics, if you actually want to grow the industry or fix problems or whatever else, you have to start to bring these problems into alignment. You have to fix what's going on in the comic shop. You also have to address what people are talking about online. But you're going to handle these things very differently, because odds are they're completely different audiences. And what is a little painful is the critics for comics often wind up making the exact same mistake that the publishers make, which is to assume these groups are the same. The people who are on Twitter giving Vita a ton of likes for whatever's going on in New Mutants does not correspond to the fact that if you look at the Amazon sales of the New Mutants trade paperback, they suck. That book's been out for about a month and a half, and it's way down the charts. It's nowhere in the top 250 of a brand new trade paperback that is labeled Vita Ayala's New Mutants trade paperback. They've given Vita's name to the top billing for that book, and last time I looked, it was like 411 on the Marvel books sold through Amazon. That's terrible for a book that's less than 60 days old. That's legit terrible. But if you were to go on Twitter, you would assume that Vita is the top-selling writer in all of comics. Why? Because people keep calling Vita the GOAT, and whenever Vita posts, you get 1,000 likes or whatever to what's going on. That doesn't correspond to sales. What's the message there? A really obvious one. What happens online is different from what's happening on the shop. The two are not in alignment. And yes, that also goes for angry videos where we talk about too much politics in comics. That's also not the reality of what's going on in the shop. I wish somebody would care more about the reality that's going on in the shop, because that group of customers, that captured group, that's what's holding this entire business afloat. Those are the people who are actually putting in the money, keeping the shops open. If that group never gets served, it is going to bleed out. It is going to die. And who is standing up talking to that group? In a weird way, the people who are critical of comics, hate Marvel, hate everything where they're going, they're not in alignment to what's happening in the local comic shop, but maybe it doesn't really matter. They're angry with Marvel anyway. They're not, they're not going to be bothered if things continue to go south for Marvel. In fact, in many cases, that's what people want. But for the publishers, you sure as hell better figure out how to align with that group, because if that goes away and you have not brought in your new audience that you keep talking about, you're screwed. Plain old screwed. The world of online commentary and in-shop is very divergent right now, very different. And there has to be an attempt to actually recognize what's going on with customers, boots on the ground in that shop. And until you get a handle on that, again, it's maybe off from the critical standpoint, but it's disaster from the publisher standpoint. One is just kind of silly and bad. The other is tank your business, if you understand what I mean here. Anyway, let me know. You've been to your local comic shop. What stories are you hearing? How are the two worlds different? Do you go into your comic shop and they talk about woke agendas and other things? I visit many shops here. I can talk from my own experience, not just in the Seattle area, all around. I'm in many Facebook groups for retailers. We talk about this topic a lot. Why doesn't the commentary online match what's going on in the shop? It just doesn't. It's two different worlds. And I think anybody looking at that would go, yeah, that seems like a problem. It seems like a problem that those two are so different. But your mileage may vary. So let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course. And thanks for listening.